Thanks for listening to the Media People Podcast, lively and insightful chats with the people who power the media industry. I'm your host, Victor Genova. For more episodes, you can go to mediapeople.ca or subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Views expressed by participants are personal. When Acast, one of the world's leading podcast companies, wanted to expand into Canada, they tapped Heather Gordon to lead the charge. A digital media sales veteran, Heather got her start at CHUM Television, working as an unpaid office assistant. She moved into a paid role at CHUM Interactive, providing sales support for one of their first digital sales teams. She rose through the ranks before taking the reins of the digital sales team responsible for the legendary Canadian music television brand, MuchMusic. From there, Heather moved to the CBC, where she led digital sales for the public broadcaster. Heather Gordon stops by to chat about many things, including the women who influenced her career, leading digital sales for some of Canada's biggest online media brands, and launching Acast's first Canadian team.
Acast is a global podcast company born in Sweden many years ago, and we are a hosting and monetization platform. So we have offices throughout the world in all the fabulous parts of the globe, and my role at Acast in Canada is the managing director.
Heather, I'm really looking forward to our chat. Thank you for stopping by today. But let's go back to the beginning first. Where are you from?
I was born in Burlington, Ontario, which is a suburb of Toronto, where I lived up until the age of about 18, when I broke free and made it to the city of Toronto, where I currently reside.
Burlington's an interesting place because it could be a suburb of Hamilton or a suburb of Toronto.
Yes, I guess so. I always saw it as a burb of Toronto. I think from an early in my teens, I knew that Toronto was my next destination. But yeah, you're right. The Hammer is right next door too.
So what were your interests or hobbies growing up? Like, what occupied you?
I was a typical teen, I think. In addition to hanging out with friends and all that nonsense, I loved movies and music, and those things still are very important and powerful in my life right now.
So, okay, let me stop you right there. Like, going back to, say, your teenage years, is there a specific movie or song that when you either see it or hear it, it just takes you back to that time?
I think when I think back about movies, I think of the film Singles. Do you remember it?
No, I don't remember Singles.
Oh, it was a good one. It was around the time where this Seattle grunge scene was emerging, and it starred Matt Dillon, and it's the soundtrack that I remember. So it was like Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Mudhoney, Screaming Trees, who I loved at the time, the Smashing Pumpkins, Mother Love Bone. It was representative of that music scene that was emerging. Who made it? Was it Cameron Crowe made it? And it was it was powerful at the time, and that soundtrack is still it still resonates if you go back and have a look at it, and I'd encourage you to go watch the film. It was very impactful at the time, and I actually should go give it another look, because it's been many years, to see if it is still impactful, or was it the time of my life, my age, and that emerging music scene that meant so much to me and my friends at the time. But it was very impactful, and I still remember it. And just thinking about the songs takes you right back, right?
Oh, I hear you. There's certain songs that when you hear them, you just kind of go back to a specific period in your life. You just absolutely can't shake it whatsoever. But you were a massive grunge fan, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Was that an overstatement?
No, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's a label that, after a while you're like, I couldn't be a massive grunge fan. I've outgrown it. But that is about an ego. And yeah, I was a massive grunge fan. Yeah, absolutely. I loved it. I loved the direction that music was going with the emergence of Nirvana and the Pearl Jams and the Soundgardens. And I was all in. It was, and then a movie to reflect all of that. It was a recipe for success. I really don't know box office how the movie did, but I bet you if you asked many other Gen Xers if that movie resonates with them, most would probably remember it and have fond memories like myself.
It's just funny you bring up grunge and movies together. One movie that really resonated with me, and it was from the grunge era. And it's weird saying that because it's kind of like grunge made this huge impact, and then as a genre, it fell off. And still, we've got certain bands that live on, like the Foo Fighters, for example, and Pearl Jam. But it's like you don't really hear about grunge as a genre anymore. But
No.
not to get sidetracked about that, I will say, remember Empire Records?
Yes.
That, like that right there. If you ask me to fuse the genre of grunge or give it a visualization that isn't a music video, I mean, that movie right there, I thought captured it. And Mallrats, and I guess anything by Kevin Smith in the 90s.
Yeah, I was never that into Kevin Smith, but yeah, it's the exact same thing. And it does capture a moment in time, and sort of brings up those old memories when you hear it, right?
Nostalgia is definitely something you can hear.
Reminds me of a mixtape.
Oh God, a mixtape or a mix CD. It's like crazy. We don't have that anymore. They're just mixed playlists. Not that I'm saying it isn't convenient, but it's like there was something tangible about cramming 12 of your favorite songs on a CD.
Yeah, I'm watching a program right now called Yellow Jackets. Are you familiar with it?
Is that one on Amazon Prime?
Think it's possibly Crave.
I have heard of it, yeah.
There, and it takes place in the present, but it goes back to a time where they make mixtapes, and a mixtape factors into one episode, and you forget, right? It's like someone cobbled together a selection of music based on what they think you would appreciate, and yeah, it was great, right? Who doesn't want to get a mixtape made?
I might want to search Amazon to try to find a stereo that's got the dual cassette player so we can make that mixtape.
Fantastic. I love it.
Did you have any influences growing up, like anyone you looked up to?
You know what? I'm in terms of influences outside of rock and roll and music and entertainment in general. Most of my inspiration has been derived from people I've worked for. I've had the luxury and have been so fortunate to work for many strong and inspiring, and mostly women who have taught me, nurtured me, been a soft landing when I needed it, and are still, for the most part, in my life, and I'm very grateful for that.
Anyone in specific you want to call out and talk about, say, a bit of advice they might have given you along the way that helped you get to where you are now at Acast?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, yeah, I'll shout out a few bosses. Roma Khanna, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Roma. She's now living in LA, but was my boss at CHUM. Then she went off to run NBC International in London, then off to MGM in LA as the president of television. So a very, very fruitful career. Maria Hale is another leader I had who I did and still do adore. She also was at CHUM, and she went on to work at TELUS and Chorus, and I believe she's in LA. Does everybody go to LA? I'm not sure.
Or New York or London. I mean, those are basically the holy trinity. If you want to say, not that you can't make it in Toronto, but if you get transplanted to any of those places, yeah, it's an instant success.
Nancy McConnell, she's now.
I know Nancy.
Yeah, Google, and she hasn't vacated for bigger cities, but yeah. So those are three women that have been very inspirational and for various reasons have taught me so much. And in terms of advice, just just I don't know. I can't. I'm trying to think of anything they've said in specific. It's more not even what they said; it's what they modeled. Smart, intelligent, empathetic, funny, interesting, engaging, all of it, and just have been very nurturing to me and kind to me. And I think kindness is underrated in a lot of times. So it goes a long way, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's something they don't talk enough about in college and university is how a good mentor or a good support group above you can do wonders for your career.
Yeah, absolutely. It can change the game. And maybe it's the fact that they're women and are in touch with that side. I'm certainly not saying that men aren't, but it just so happens to be in my case that three very strong women have also shown a lot of kindness. And you can be all those things. You can be smart, you can be intelligent, you can be funny, you can be empathetic and kind. You don't need to be one toward the other, you know?
Oh, I totally hear you. Your very first job ever, while we're on the topic of nostalgia, really struck a chord with me. What was your first job?
When I was a bartender, or when I went to
Oh,
CHUM.
Bun King Bakery. Come on.
Oh, Bun King Bakery. Oh
How
my
did
God.
you forget Bun King Bakery?
Oh my God. Yeah, in Burlington. I worked at Bun King when I was quite young. Yeah, I loved my job at Bun King. Loved it.
We had a Bun King out here too. I don't know if it was by the same owners or people were just using the name and no one was suing anyone for copyright infringement, but
Yeah, I love the Bun King Bakery. Fond memories, Victor.
okay, so what did you learn about yourself in your very first part-time job? Because that's something I like to ask people. Because it's funny because you're working retail, but not the typical retail that people would expect when you say, hey, I worked retail, because they'd think you'd work department store, clothing store, but this was a little bit different.
Well, the first thing that was different was they were willing to hire me at, I can't remember how old I was, but I felt a little bit young at the time to be having a first job and being responsible for a till of, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I was ambitious and from a young age, and I knew I had tastes that I wanted to buy things. And my mother always said, you're going to have to get a good job because your tastes are a little extravagant. So I wanted to get to work. I wanted to make my own money. And Bun King was willing to hire me, and I was willing to work hard for it because I wanted to enjoy the spoils of having access to money in my teens when those desires to have purchase power kick in.
Literally, you were kind of laying the seeds for your future career in sales because you don't go into sales unless you like money.
Buns don't sell themselves, Victor.
That's true.
Actually, do it, Bun King, because they're so good. Yeah, I think sales was a little bit of a natural for me, definitely. If you can sell a bun, you can sell anything.
You can definitely sell media if you can sell a Kaiser.
Absolutely. That's a good quote. I'm going to have to write that down.
We got to put it on a t-shirt or a bumper sticker or something like that.
Totally. A Kaiser, good one.
So what brought you to Sheridan College and what did you study?
I wanted to be in television. I found it very difficult to imagine a world where I had an exact idea of what it is that I wanted to do. I knew I loved television. I knew I loved city TV and MuchMusic. I loved this street front, storefront accessibility. I liked that they stripped the walls down about how to make television, and they showed you how to make television. You saw lights, you saw cameras, you saw activity in the back. I loved all of it. So that's what I wanted to do. And the easiest way to do that was to learn how to make television. So Sheridan offered a course, many courses. I took media arts, where you learn video production, audio production, all of it, videography, film. So you did a little bit of everything to learn like how to do a switcher, how to switch cameras in a TV production, all of it.
Did they also teach you how to write for television as well too?
There was writing, but not no, I wouldn't say I left school knowing how to write a script. I'm sure I could have continued on in various writer courses to do that. I left more with an understanding of how to, light up a couple of people, or how to get the audio right, or, how to work a camera, that kind of thing.
And after graduation, you found your way into the industry. But we already teased it a little bit via bartending at the Phoenix. So tell us what you were doing there, and did you use that to parlay into MuchMusic, or were you just kind of doing that or working at CHUM as an assistant, or was that kind of something you were just doing side by side with that?
I think I was bartending in parallel to school, again, just to have cash. I moved to the city. It's an expensive place to live. And then so as soon as I graduated, I just started bartending a lot more. at the Phoenix. We made a very good money, had a very good time. But I knew I needed to, get into the television racket and, start building my future. But, it was a hard building to get into. It's like, it's hard when you're just out of school and if you don't know people I was sending in resumes and, nothing was landing. I didn't know anybody. And then a fellow bartender named Gregory at the Phoenix introduced me to somebody there who was head of the entertainment division. I'm forgetting what the division was called, but would put on, did all the event planning and a bunch of different roles within the organization. And I built a resume on the back of an Absolute vodka bottle where I found the same stencil and stenciled my resume. It was like Absolute Heather, and then just some stats on me. And so I got an interview because of it, and there wasn't a job, but she's like, we need to get you in here somewhere. And then City Interactive launched, and there was like 3 paid employees, and they needed an office manager, an office assistant, but they didn't have a budget. So I was like, I'll do it. And so I bartended until 3 a.m, then got my butt in the chair from Monday to Friday at 9 a.m. and then slowly evolved that into a paying job and sales assistant. And I just sort of started to fill the roles that would eventually vacate. So they never had to look for anybody. I just was there.
Your love for CHUM, how much of it was the actual brands versus the actual building? Because we don't talk enough about, I don't think the CHUM City building gets enough credit, because it's kind of like, what's the best way I could put it? It's kind of like, I don't know, the Wrigley Field of Canada of media, or the Cinderella Castle. Like, I'm trying to think of like those iconic things that look larger than life, that you they look kind of surreal. You're like, that building doesn't exist in real life until you get there and go, wow, this is really where the magic happens.
It was all of it. Like, I loved the brands, fashion TV, spectacular movie TV, spectacular media TV, the news, MuchMusic, just the lack of any structure, where they would just take what felt like regular people off the street. I mean, I know that's a simplification, and turn them into VJs if they had a passion for the music craft and pop culture. And it was all so intoxicating to me. And of course, it came wrapped up in a beautiful building at the corner of Queen and John, and they would throw open the walls and allow people in, sometimes figuratively, sometimes not. And it was really intoxicating. I was in. I just needed to figure out a way to make it happen. And with a little perseverance, I made it happen.
Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 words. We're going to go way back with this one, because this was one thing I really remember about. There are a couple things to remember about MuchMusic back in the day, but Electric Circus.
Yeah, baby.
Oh, that was every Friday night. I mean, you throw that on, and that was fantastic. And speaking of going onto the street, that's exactly what they would do. It literally, Queen and John would turn into a giant party.
Totally. Monica Diol.
Yep, Monica Diol. And the other one I missed too for MuchMusic, maybe they're still doing it and I miss it, but definitely not on this scale. Remember the Intimate and Interactives?
Yes, so wonderful.
Oh,
And
those were great.
it was just television like people weren't making. And yeah, all of it. I do remember Intimate and Interactive, and those were wonderful. And it obviously is a shame that that's not the way we consume our content anymore, and people don't need to tune into one channel. But it was a time when, if you wanted to promote a single, an album, whatever, a movie release, you had to hit MuchMusic. It was not optional. It was important for an artist to get exposure.
And I remember, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, not to cut you off.
Now there's nothing to cut off. What the future became. It became YouTube. It became 30 other ways to access content, and then the eventual ratings decline and where we're at now.
And what's really unfortunate is, what I really appreciated about the Intimate and Interactive concerts is that they were like 50% concert, 50% talk show. And I really like that. I felt that an interview with an artist seemed to be a lot richer if it was done in between sets or after they had just performed. rather than just, oh, another press junket, sit here, here's journalist number 32 who's going to ask you the same questions.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the VJs had an authenticity about them that resonated. I mean, not every band is going to like every VJ, and we certainly have lots of great stories about conflict. But I think you're right. I think that that environment created an opportunity for wonderful sharing and that intimacy. That's why it's called intimate and interactive. And it managed to capture something really special that I'm just not sure we see anymore, or at least I don't. Everybody can control their image, I think, a lot more now, and you don't see that level of like the interviews that they used to produce at the New Music. I mean, people getting interviewed in bathtubs under all sorts of influences, and it was just spectacular. You don't really see that anymore because people's images are so heavily guarded, and the press people are always around to make sure that you don't catch those unhinged moments that often.
My favorite character on MuchMusic was easily Ed the Sock. Like, nothing against Bill Lichka or Amanda Walsh, but when he would put out, you remember Fromage, where he would just narrate and rip apart? Oh my God, those had me in stitches. They were so brilliantly written. And I remember watching, and I really liked how at least CHUM management allowed whoever Ed the Sock was to be critical, because there was one MuchMusic Video Award show where he was interviewing Kid Rock off stage, and you could tell Kid Rock was not having a good time. I don't think the whole format of it being a giant party really jived with him. And they were both he was ripping into the format with him, trying to feed him lines about like, this is really dull, this is crap. And like Kid Rock would be like, your words, not mine, your words, not mine whatsoever. And I miss that kind of aspect of it. The MMVAs were also fantastic. And that's something I appreciated about MuchMusic. It was like, okay, certain formats were already adopted by MTV in the States, like their Unplugged concert. And they'd say, well, how can we take it to a new level? Which is how we got intimate and interactive. And they said, rather than do awards show at like the O'Keefe Center around the corner, we're going to just throw a big ass party in the parking lot throughout the entire building. And I miss that.
So do I. It was a good time.
Okay, so do you have a story meeting a celebrity? You kind of hinted that the VJs, obviously sometimes there was conflict with an artist that we didn't see, but did you ever have a moment with an artist where you're like good or bad or anything like that? You can't believe they said that to you or you ran into them, or maybe you were just observing something, if you can share that.
Yeah, there's one that's kind of mild. I was pretty humiliated at the time, but it is kind of funny now. We didn't, with the Intimate and Interactives for a while, we would invite the guests up to the interactive division where I worked so they could do an online chat, which at the time was like a pretty big deal. They didn't always type for themselves. But anyway, I was wearing a button up, but it was a little bit more than a button up. It was a little bit more of a clubby number that buttoned right up the front, as one does. And I went to the washroom, and in the hall I passed Gavin Rossdale. Is it Gavin?
Gavin Rossdale from Bush.
And he was coming at me and he was staring right at my chest, and I was like, oh, that's a little bit forward, but I understand. And then I got into the washroom, and one of the middle button of my shirt had popped open, and I looked like a little bit of a twat. But there's just stuff like that I was a little bit embarrassed at the time, but that's the fun of it, right? You probably wouldn't be in a situation where you walk down the hall and walked by an artist that wasn't flanked by somebody anymore. But that's just the kind of the environment at the time. Everybody, by and large, the entertainment felt comfortable. They would walk around the parties. They would, it was generally, I think, enjoyed as refreshing as opposed to maybe some of the other stuff that they had to do as part of press junkets and touring and stuff like that. It was fun.
So you said you started as an office assistant at CHUM and started working your way up through the sales ladder. So I assume the next step was sales coordinator?
Yeah, it was very like the beauty of CHUM was I wouldn't say loosey goosey because they obviously did so many things right, but it was a new division. So I don't want to date myself, but advertising online was relatively new. So we were kind of all making it up as we went. And the sales rep was hired, and I just became the de facto support, sending out proposals and doing what I can to support her. And, just watching, listening. Had no experience, didn't know any of it, didn't know how to turn a computer on the day I sat down for the job. But just watched and learned. And then when that person moved on, I just kept doing the job that she was doing, or to the best of my abilities at the time, and just tried to make it so there was no need to replace her because I had already done it. And that is an opportunity I just don't know if that would come along anymore. And there's a lot of controversy around unpaid internships, and whether that is taking advantage of people. And I come from a background where if I didn't volunteer my services for no charge, I wouldn't have been given a paid opportunity. So in my experience, it was very beneficial because I got the opportunity to learn how to do a job by being trained on the job. And CHUM was great for that, for giving you an opportunity to learn and to grow. I mean, half of the on-air staff talent that you saw started on reception. Like Jennifer Valentine, Ziggy, they all started, to my knowledge, answering phones. And just, it was a place and a time where you could aspire to do more and be better. And it could actually happen, which was part of the magic.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing about the way jobs are structured now. Like I had one boss at CBC. I think it was Tim Murray who was telling me the story that I think he actually started in the mailroom at CBC because that's what you did after graduation. You found the company you wanted to work at. You got into whatever department you wanted to, whatever department you could get into, and then from there you just hustled your way to the top. As openings came up, you just put yourself forward for that. We don't have that anymore.
Doesn't feel like it. No, it doesn't seem to exist in that same way. So I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to do it, and that it worked out. But yeah, no, it can be very frustrating if it's like, well, you need the experience to get this job, but how do I get the experience if I don't get the job? And I think it causes people to move around quite a bit so they can move forward a little bit. And yeah, it's a tough one.
It is a bit of a catch-22, but CHUM was eventually acquired by Bell Media.
CTV.
CTV
Yeah.
Bell Media. Okay, so when that acquisition happened, did the corporate culture change much? Did it become a little bit more rigid, or was it just basically business as usual, just new owners at the top?
It changed. I'm just trying to remember how drastic it was. I don't think it came in overnight like a tsunami. I just think the tides might have gotten bigger every day. And eventually, yeah, a lot of the spirit of CHUM diminished, and shows were cut. And that when you're purchased by a CTV, then a Bell, whose focus is on bottom lines and finding ways to save money, and that's what happens. You no longer get the sex TVs, the ooh la las, if you remember that program.
Yep, I do.
Because they weren't driving the profit they needed to be, and they weren't the efficiencies that they needed. So that part of the culture changed, and then of course with the efficiencies you lose people, and that's always a challenge, and it can be disheartening when people that you sort of cut your teeth with in your career are no longer there. So it's never easy, that kind of change, and that spirit is definitely gone. And it's kind of funny. Anybody that's worked for CHUM, there seems to be this little club of people that are so grateful that we had the opportunity at the time, which is a nice way to look back and think about that time of your life.
You made the jump to a leadership role at do I call it CTV, Globe Media, CHUM at that point, Bell,
Yeah.
like whatever the official term is?
Yeah, then I moved into a manager role and started to build a team, which was exciting because that little thing called internet advertising works, and it stuck around.
So when you moved into that role, was it just a natural progression? Like the opening happened and they said, hey, look, Heather, you've been here. You were kind of like employee number 1 or 2 on this. We're going to move you into it. Or did you have to go into your boss's office and say, hey, we need a little bit more management on the team. We've got to grow it. We've got to change the dynamic because, like you said, internet advertising is taking off. How did we go about growing there?
It's a good question. I don't have a crystal clear memory of it at the time. I think it was organic. It was like, the numbers were moving year over year in the right direction, and many years, very aggressive growth. And it was just a recognition that in order to keep that growth, we're going to need a staff. And I had been there and had been part of the build, getting like MuchMusic.com to where it was, and City TV and those sites. So it was just a natural evolution. And it just made sense, and the additional revenue we're making meant we could unlock more bodies. So it was a good time.
And the portfolio of brands that you were responsible for at that time grew as well. It wasn't just MuchMusic. There was the MTV Comedy Group, and then Vivo came on board as well, which is kind of ironic because we were just talking about how, hey, the way music was pre-internet, or when the internet was in its infancy, and just kind of the culture associated with it, and how we've kind of moved to this on-demand consumption model. And that's basically what Vivo was. It was, correct me if I'm wrong, the opportunity to actually have legally placed music videos, so the artists would get the royalties rather than just having some random person upload a Soundgarden video or something like that.
Yeah, Vivo was and is, to my knowledge, a conglomeration of all the record labels, with the exception of Warner Brothers, I think. And I don't know.
Yeah, Warner's not part of Vivo. That I do know for sure.
I would have thought that would have changed in the last couple of years, but I guess not. So yeah, and it was our realization at MuchMusic at MTV that we aren't the only game in town, but with a strong desire to remain the leaders in the music space. So it was a proactive attempt to make sure that when an ad community, like a buyer or a planner, thought of the power of music and reaching people via music, that they thought of the Much and MTV group. And it was through building up the partnership with Vivo that we could still claim to be a must buy if you want to reach that target demographic who consumes a lot of music. So that was that strategic decision to still stay in the music game.
But the opportunity presented itself to move to CBC and become the director of digital sales there. What brought you to the CBC? Did you find the role, or did the role find you?
That's a good question. I think, well, it's a small industry, Victor. You know that. It's and Mary Crook, that's it. Mary, who ran the brand partnership group at CTV, left CTV and turned up at CBC. And I knew Mary, and you can't live in Canada and not be familiar with the corp. And it was time. I had invested a lot of myself in the CHUM Bell CTV combo, but it was time for a change, and I felt like it was the right time for a change. I had my two children, and it's funny. I guess it's like an evolution of my life. While I was living rock star years in behavior, I worked at MuchMusic and MTV, and then as my life evolved and I started to care about things that matter for the future, like the environment and politics and all that sort of stuff, it's like my career mirrored what was happening in my personal life, and I was ready for a change to go tackle a different kind of content, and the CBC fit perfectly. And it's a great experiencing working at a great experience working at the public broadcaster, and it was a fun 5 years, and I met and have maintained a lot of really wonderful friendships.
Oh, I'm an ex-CBCer, so I can completely concur with you there. Let me ask you, though, what did you find was the biggest difference, or maybe if it was even a challenge, working at, say, a public broadcaster versus a private company?
I think because we were partially funded, there was probably partially funded by the government. I think there was a larger divide between content and sales, where we weren't quite as integrated, because we weren't as revenue driven because we were partially government funded. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I know exactly what you're saying.
It was a little bit more separate than, say, the integration we had and the integration I have now at Acast. We are hand in glove with our content brothers and sisters, and we build together and we monetize together, and we do it holding hands, and with an eye to each other's business. We don't want to hurt the content business with ad sales, but we also know we have, you know what I mean? It's working together. We have ad sales targets, we have listens targets, and we work together. And that may have been a little more absent at the CBC.
How did the opportunity to join Acast present itself?
At the CBC had a relationship with Acast because they monetized the CBC podcast audience outside of Canada. So I met
okay.
They were working for us, and for all the reasons we thought they were the right reseller for us. It was all the reasons I was interested in working with them, and it was also an opportunity to build something in Canada, because it didn't exist. So it was a great growth opportunity to build a team.
And podcasting, it's got to be one of your favorite mediums.
I love it. I fell in love with it at CBC, and props to CBC. Nobody does it better. I believe there's a song of the same name. The audio content produced at the CBC is spectacular. The podcast made me fall in love with the medium. The intimacy, it blew me away. And also from an ad sales perspective, the level of integration, the fact that podcasts were not cluttered with ads, the tone of them, the host read opportunities, like it felt like something special. And it had been a while since I'd had that reaction to an ad product. And I obviously saw what was happening in the market, that there seemed to be growing demand, and that it didn't look like the demand was ceasing anytime soon. And it again, there's just a gut instinct that says this is a challenge and a risk I'm going to take. And I've loved every second of it. I love the medium. I love the company that I work for. I love the people that I work with. And it just felt right, and it was right.
Talk to me though about working for a wait a minute, did you start this job though during the pandemic or before it started?
I haven't been in an office.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because you get this really great opportunity to lead Canada for Acast, and you're doing it virtually when it seems like the rest of the world is falling apart around you. And why that's so important to us is because we're in advertising sales. When the world starts to crumble, advertisers get nervous with their budgets. So was it a little bit more difficult given the circumstances? Like, do you think it would have been easier if, one, we weren't heading towards a self-inflicted recession and you weren't completely virtual with your peers?
Good questions. The funny thing that we noticed at the CBC is, when the pandemic hit, obviously budgets were impacted. Not everybody's creative, but a lot of the creative were free spirits roaming free in a society. Like everything was upended. It's like, we can't air a commercial that isn't reflective of the fact that we're in a pandemic. So obviously broadcast budgets were impacted and digital budgets, but for some reason the podcast budgets, I think they were the only medium at the CBC that didn't take a hit. And I think it's because, well, obviously podcasts are great, but it's also the ability to shift creative so quickly. We could record another spot in 10 minutes. You didn't have to reshoot anything. You didn't have to go outside to a studio that was off limits. You didn't need a camera. You didn't need a crew to come together, which was dangerous. Podcasting was the right medium at the right time. Now, obviously, the revenue, it was a lot lower. It's a new medium, but there was enough evidence there to me that it was the right thing to do. And I'm a consumer and a listener, and I know the power of podcasts. And I see the studies. We execute those studies. They work. They are powerful, and I just had the confidence that nothing is pandemic proof, but I had the confidence that we'd be okay.
There was a piece of research. I saw it on LinkedIn years ago, and I wish I had downloaded it. And it was basically saying that when it comes to branding, audio creative has the best brand recall with anyone. Like, it beats television, it beats print, it beats everything. I wish I could find that piece of creative, because I brought it up in a meeting a little while back and people didn't believe me. And then I can't believe I'm doing this on my own podcast. I said, okay, let me know if this gets out of your head. And I went, fabric land. And some people were like, what did he say? And others were like, yep, we ain't going to shake that for the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's stuck in there now. Theater of the mind. The mind is a powerful machine. And there's just, you are a captured audience, walking your dog or frittering about, and it gets into your brain, and Fabricland's a great example.
Okay, so podcasting isn't the only medium you're into right now. You are also a published children's author. Tell us a little bit about that. Where did that idea come about?
I'd always wanted, I think like a lot of people, I wanted to write a kid's book. And it had many stops and starts, and it's a lot harder than it looks. At first I was like, well, how hard can it be to come up with a cute little story? The Dr. Seuss makes it look relatively easy. And then of course you get into it and you find it's not that easy. And, I'd put it aside and think about it and then forget about it. And then of course I had kids, and then, the passion sort of ignited again. And then I married an actual novelist, who does write books, real books. And he was very, very encouraging and provided the support that I needed and the reassurance that I wasn't nuts. And finally wrote the kids' book that I wanted to write, and managed to do it while I was at the CBC, and it was a lot of work. Don't regret any of it. It is a big hustle on top of a day job. And I didn't realize what I was getting into when I did it. But I'm thrilled I did it. I love it. I still enjoy picking it up and reading it. And then I loved it so much, I did a second one. I just had an idea for a second book, so I had to do the second book. But now I feel like it's out of my system. But who knows, right?
You don't know when you're going to get that next creative burst or idea.
I don't think I will, but I didn't think I would after Does the Queen Fart? I felt like it
was. Is that the first book?
Yeah, it is, Victor. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's great. Are we talking about just a generic queen, or are we calling out Queen Elizabeth?
Well, it was more, it occurred to me when I had children that we spend inadvertently, we give and send a lot of messages about their little bodies. Like if they poop, it's ooh, stinky, and when they fart, ooh, gross, and all of these natural bodily functions that I think we inadvertently kind of send some signals that their body isn't perfect, that they're stinky, and that's yucky, and that's bad, and what the reality is our bodies and our brains are these complex machines that I can't even begin to understand. How we breathe, how our brains work, consciousness, like it's all magic, an amazement to me. And the last thing I would hate to do is accidentally give my child the idea that what their body was doing was less than perfect. So that's where the idea came from. And then the Queen was sort of the natural, like, who would be the most shocking person on the world that could ever fart. So, it's a nod to the English throne, but it could be anybody really. And of course she does fart, and bodies do produce these crazy noises when you feed them with broccoli and Brussels sprouts and all these good foods that make you fart. Your body's doing the right thing. Celebration of the body, Victor.
What about the second book? What's the title of that one?
I Am Lazarus, a goat story.
What's that about?
It's about friendship. It's loosely based on the Greek Spartacus. Are you familiar with the Spartacus legend?
I saw season 1 of, I think it was a Stars or Showtime show that was out 15 years ago, but I am somewhat familiar with Spartacus.
Douglas Stanley Kubrick film, many, many decades ago. I love the film, and I love, the message that it basically, Spartacus stands up when someone's asking, who is Spartacus, because he was going to be killed. Kurt Douglas stands up and says, I'm Spartacus. But then all the other slaves slowly started one by one to stand up and say, no, I'm Spartacus, I'm Spartacus. And of course, they couldn't all be killed. So they basically stood by their friend. And that essentially happens at the end of the kids' book. They're goats, mind you. And the goat's name is Lazarus as opposed to Spartacus. But, it's about friendship and standing by your friends and solidarity and all those wonderful things that you hope to instill in your children.
And if anyone listening wants to pick up a copy of either book or both, where can they do so?
Amazon is probably the easiest. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. Happy to throw to that. I'm really enjoying our chat. Are you ready, though, for rapid fire questions?
Go.
The campaign you're most proud of?
Well, we just launched in partnership with Intuit, a podcast with the Raptors' very own superstar, Fred VanVleet. So Fred was interested in getting into the podcast space, but was not interested in a podcast about basketball. He wanted to promote BIPOC entrepreneurs and lend his hand and his voice to help them in their business ventures. So we, in partnership with Intuit, launched Bet on Yourself, which is a wonderful podcast that just finished season 1.
Your favorite movie?
Oh my gosh, I've got lots of favorites. Generally, I think I love Dracula the most, whether it's Christopher Lee or Gary Oldman or Bela Lugosi.
I was about to throw that out there, Bela Lugosi.
Yeah, he's quintessential Dracula. There's been many great Draculas, and I loved them all.
He also spanned a number of different films, not just within its kind of own franchise, even though they didn't use that term back then, but like he would headline the Dracula films, but then like Abbott and Costello meets Dracula, he'd be in those ones too. It's like he was the go-to person for Dracula at that point. Even though that wasn't a copywritten or trademarked role, anyone could have made a Dracula film. Yeah,
he definitely is Dracula to a lot of people, but I'm sure, younger generations probably aren't even aware of who he is. But I'm here to keep the Dracula legend alive. It's my favorite.
I'm with you on that. Those old Universal monsters, I loved those films.
And there's other movies like La Grande Bellezza, which is an Italian film, which is one of my favorites that I probably need to watch about once a month, and I would encourage you to watch. Book adaptations like Dracula, Age of Innocence, I adore. There's so many. I love movies.
The Age of Innocence is an interesting one because that's a Scorsese film, and he's got quite the cast in that. Like we got Michelle Pfeiffer, Daniel Day-Lewis. I even think Winona Ryder's in that one too.
She is. It's all spectacular. The visuals are heavenly to watch. Daniel Day-Lewis is glorious to behold. Michelle Pfeiffer is spectacular. Like it's a poem. It's so good.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
Of course, Tilda Swinton. Who doesn't? She's spectacular. Or Kate Winslet. Not Kate Winslet. Kate Blanchett. Spectacular woman.
Kate Blanchett's got huge range. Likewise with Tilda Swinton.
They're both spectacular women. They just seem like tough as nails, smart, fearless. I'm certainly not suggesting I'm any of those things, but they're just nice to behold.
So my follow-up to that question, if Hollywood were to make that movie based on your life story, what would you call it?
Oh, God.
If you're stuck, we can go with Oh, God.
Oh, God. We'll call it Oh, God. Oh, God, it's me, Margaret. No, I'm just kidding. That's a Judy Blume book. I loved that book growing up, too. You remember Judy Blume?
I do remember Judy Blume.
Amazing, amazing books.
Your favorite book?
Dracula. See, I love Dracula.
Your favorite song?
Oh my God, it's whatever I'm listening to at the time. I think I've got Aztec Camera, Oblivious on right now. It's whatever I'm listening to is all of a sudden my favorite again. I heard Dinosaur Jr. on what was I watching? It must have been Yellow Jackets. They had part of the mixtape episode. They played Dinosaur Jr. Feel the Pain. Again, taken right back. I'm like, that's my favorite song. Whatever I hear, I absorb it and think it's my favorite song. I've got too many.
The best advice you have ever received?
Oh, from my husband, it's only take the yeses personally. He's very good at this kind of stuff. He, as a novelist, I suppose he hears no's quite a bit. It's a tough business. Well, every business is challenging. But yeah, that was a good one. Just don't sweat it. Just take the yeses personally.
You could say the same with sales too. You are definitely going to hear more no's than yeses. And if you let the no's consume you, you're not going to have a career.
It's true. It's true. Very true. But so that's my sound advice. Just take the yeses personally. Let the rest go.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
I think I probably spent more time concerned with what people were thinking of me or their perception of me. And I think the older you get, the more you realize, A, you don't care, B, they're not even thinking about you. But that just comes with time, right? That's I could have told my younger self that, but I probably wouldn't have believed it. You just sort of arrive and you're like, oh, right. They're not even thinking about me at all.
My signature closing question, if you weren't in media, what would you be doing and why?
I hope I'd be making television. Television is so good right now. And I hope I would have landed on the other side of the business and actually got to experience making television, because wouldn't that be exciting, Victor? Wouldn't that be exciting?
Oh, I'd kill to be a writer for television or even movies as well.
I want to be in a writer's room just once.
Do you pay attention? Or not pay attention? Do you watch those? I think it's the Hollywood Reporter does the roundtables on YouTube.
Oh, I think I have. I don't make a habit of it. Should I?
Oh God, they're wonderful. It's like what really reinvigorated my love or passion for film was when the DVD came out. And the DVD, when I started to just explore the extras, because I'm like, well, how many times can you watch this movie? It's great that I own it. And then like listening to the director's commentary and stuff like that, it really opened my eyes to the way they think and the way things are constructed. It showed me that it was so much more deeper than it was. And that kind of fueled my passion to do what I'm doing right now and just for writing in general.
Amazing.
But I'd totally recommend that. If like it's a Hollywood Reporter on YouTube, they'll do these roundtables, and then I think it's Variety also does something called Actors on Actors, where they'll have two different actors interview each other. It's really good. There's a really good one with Variety where they do, and this is very topical for right now, John Levy and Kieran Culkin.
Oh, hilarious! He's so fun.
Yeah, two guys who literally steal every scene in the respective shows that they're in.
Yeah. Who was the first one? I just caught.
It was John Levy. Am I getting his right? Like Eugene Levy's son from Schitt's Creek.
Oh, Dan Levy.
Dan Levy. Sorry, I don't know why I said John Levy.
Oh, hilarious!
Dan Levy.
Watching Schitt's Creek right now. I'm the last person on the planet, especially because I'm Canadian, and I'm enjoying every second of it. And of course, I'm obsessed with Succession. So yeah, I would definitely love to go out for dinner with those two.
I'm with you though on Schitt's Creek. I got into it fairly late as well. My wife and I actually just binged it from, if you can say it was binging, from December right through the last couple of weeks. And it was great.
We're down to the last season and I'm a little bit disappointed, but I wish there was more. But it takes talent to go out on top and know when to leave the party. It's never my strong suit, but good on them.
I agree with that. I like a show that's willing to say, no, this is the right time to stop, rather than just let, no offense to accountants, let the accountant say, well, it's still making money, let's keep going. Because you look at those shows and you're just like, you know what, the first 4 seasons were great, but the last 2, we didn't need those.
We didn't need them. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a smart decision, and you always leave your audience wanting more, I guess, right?
Well, here's one little teaser I'll leave you with. If yourself or anyone else has not watched Ozark yet, watch it. Oh my God, it is probably some of the most brilliant television right now. Really? And oh God, yeah. It is like, have you seen it?
I started the first season and I don't know why I didn't continue on. Maybe I need to reinvest, because that sounds like a very strong recommendation.
Here's what I'll tease people with. One, you get to see Jason Bateman in a role I've never seen him in. He's usually, you know what he is. He's Michael Bluth. I mean, he's the funny but not the funniest character in the comedy show, but he's the one keeping his family together, and he's the guy showing up in a rom-com. But he is completely different, and I really like seeing actors get out of their I don't want to say their element, but out of like that typecast role that they're usually in. And he's brilliant in it. And another teaser too is like one thing I appreciated about Game of Thrones was that despite the number of actors that were stacked into that and how strong the roles were, they wouldn't think twice about killing someone off. Like just one day it's just like, oh, we think the show's going to revolve around them, and then their head's on the floor. Yeah. And that's what I like about Ozark. You could be like, ooh, let's see where this character's story goes. And next thing you know, spoiler, they got a bullet in their head. And you're just like, oh, I thought we'd see at least 2 more seasons of this person. And so, yeah.
He's good right now is because they're not afraid to take those chances and kill off their main characters. That's why it's good.
And this season as well was announced well ahead of time that it was going to be the final season. And I think it's because the pandemic was interrupting production of the final season that they had to film it into 2 parts. So they've just dropped, this is season 4. They dropped the first 7 or 8 episodes of season 4. And then we're literally just waiting for a trailer for the back half. And in typical Ozark fashion, they left you hanging at the end.
Okay, I'm going to commit to it. That's my next watch after Yellow Jackets is over.
I'm serious. And then, you know what? Call me and we'll talk about it.
Okay, I will.
All right.
Watch Singles.
I will. I'll watch Singles as well. Heather, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been fun. Thanks, Vic.
That's it for today's show. For more episodes, you can go to mediapeople.ca or subscribe wherever you get podcasts. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram @VicGenova.